Om Shtapakaya Chatarmasya Sarvadharma Swarupine Avatar Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha. Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya Namo Namaha. Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya Namo Namaha. Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya Namo Namaha. Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Resha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagatcha Akanda Rupa Stiti Reva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the teachings, or with the world. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Good afternoon. We are coming to you live streaming in the far distant Hawaiian village of Pahoa, which is about an hour and a half from our own ashram, which is where we usually live stream from. But giving you a little bit of an idea of our atmosphere here, we're in a yoga studio. The sun is out, there's greenery all around us, and the Hawaiian winds are blowing lightly. And we have gathered here a group of us of the SRV Sangha and any guests that come to talk on the Advaita of the Avatars, which is the name of this series that we're presently engaged in. This is the third installment of that, and we'll finish it up next week back at our Honoka'a ashram. So we are accompanied by the sounds of nearby traffic and wind, and maybe later in the afternoon you'll hear some koki frogs come out here and add to a background song. But whatever the case may be, I hope you can hear me well and see me even better. And I hope these teachings will reach you in a deep way. This is the Vedanta, sometimes called the voice of freedom or the future religion of mankind, as Vivekananda said, especially the Advaitic element. That word Advaita means non-duality. Has to do with not two-ness, that is seeing the synthesis of all things based upon a backdrop or a substratum of oneness that we all feel in our hearts. They sometimes call that the Antaryami, the inner ruler, immortal, seated in the heart, watching all the changing phenomena go by. So you rather, if you're a spiritual aspirant, take up this stand, this perspective that everything that goes on outside that's changing or appearing to change all the time is in Maya or is in nature. Maya and Prakriti being somewhat of synonymous terms used at different periods of time in India for nature or for form, for the covering power of form. Whenever form comes along, whether it's external like this or whether it's internal in the mind, my mind covering things with its thoughts, with its projections, with its conceptions, worse with its misconceptions, then you have a covering power, avarana shakti. It's natural to form. It's not something that is sentient evil. It's something that's an insentient principle that living beings have to forbear, as we were talking about this morning at satsang, if you were there with us. And once you understand it, then you can begin to penetrate through it and see that underlying presence of Brahman in everything, which we were just chanting about. And know it to be that recognition of that is akin to enlightenment, which is what everyone's seeking in spiritual circles, are talking so much about enlightenment or illumination or freedom or moksha or mukti, or Father of Yoga used the word koivalya, and those states that one attains, called nirvana, nirvikalpa, sampragyata, satori in Zen, fana in Muslim religion, shanti, 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 the peace that passes all understanding in Christianity. Attain those states, and called by those names by the seers and saints and sages of the different religious traditions of the world. So we know that to have that condition of mind, because basically we're talking mostly about mind here. Bodies come and go, but mind is, and brains come and go too with the bodies. But mind is a abiding principle. It's the realm of consciousness, mind is. It's those kingdoms of heaven within you, and those are eternal. They go in cycles, no doubt, but those cycles are so long that nobody can remember them for very long. It beggars description, and it transcends the mind's ability to think in terms of even 4,320,000,000 year cycles. Though, since we got introduced to that long a cycle, we began to comprehend it a little more, didn't we? When we first heard 4,320,000,000 years, we thought, oh, that's too much to think about. But as we ran it over in our mind more and more, the mind got more used to thinking in terms, oh, there are cycles that are 4 billion years long. Maybe that's not so long after all. Maybe when I close my eyes tonight and sleep, and the next time I open them, 4 billion years will have gone by. Sort of like Rip Van Winkle. And if your consciousness isn't there in change, in evolution, in nature, then it might as well just be asleep for 4 billion years. The distinction that's made between the person who sleeps, though, and the person who awakens spiritually, the seer or the sage or the avatar, as we're talking about in this series of classes. Avatar means that which descends. It means it comes out from inside. It doesn't ascend from the physical heavens, it comes outward from the heavens within and visits different stations along the way. It would, if you were an avatar and you were going to come to Earth, you would, and I've just wrote this in my recent book, a whole last chapter about how an avatar or a soul incarnating in the body would come out from an illumined condition. Now we have to make a distinction there. There's some souls that keep their consciousness in a state of samsara all the time. So they don't come out of that high consciousness. They come out of their last lifetime's karma. You understand the distinction. They're coming out of a cyclic karma all the time. That's where they're keeping their consciousness. So to them, they're ignorant from birth to death and death to birth. As my teacher used to say, from the cradle to the grave, was the expression he used. They don't know what's happening to them. So they don't know there are many lifetimes, and they can't remember their last one. And so they can't prepare for their next one, or they don't see the efficacy of preparing for their next one. So we draw a distinction between those kind of beings and these beings who are luminaries, particularly the avatars, or that which descends from on high, if you want to use the Christian expression, is that they would come out of this formless mass of consciousness, Chidgana or Brahman. And first thing they would encounter would be this hum of the sound Om. And they would know themselves to be in the realm of the word now. Potential, form in potential. In a very, very high state. Still formless, but the potential for form is there in the word. And then from there they would gravitate further out of that station, and they'd behold the cosmic mind. The cosmic mind would be the next station. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, the Trinity is there, and unmanifested Prakriti is there. Everything in potential waiting to spring into form. So then they'd see that aperture, like these are apertures, right? These holes, as it were, caves, tunnels, vortexes that are coming from, that souls come from outside, from inside out through this passageway of subtle network of nerves, nadis they're called, the yogis. So they're taking on stations of consciousness like that. And they know them because when they passed away in their previous lifetime, whether it be 500 years ago, which is the usual time span between avatars' manifestation, like Buddha to Christ was 550 years, for instance. So they might not come back as often as ignorant people do. Or illumined souls sometimes, like Vivekananda, maybe once every 800 years or 1,000 years could come out into a body to see what kind of mischief humanity's gotten itself into over a millennia. But anyway, coming out of that formless state is sort of like you coming out of deep sleep into dream and out of dream into waking. But you don't know yet, that those are three stages of your consciousness yet. You haven't defined dreaming and deep sleep yet. You just think waking state. And you haven't brought your consciousness in and mastered the U of Om and the M of Om. You're pretty much hanging out in the A of Om, creation. Everyone likes to create and project. It's a lot of work to sustain, and then nobody wants to dissolve. You see. That's basically it. Nobody wants Shiva. They all want to see the thing projected and sustained and not lift a finger to help it, you see. And that's possible when you've got billions and billions of souls holding one of those stations, one of those levels of consciousness, like the ancestors, billions of them holding the level of the ancestor. Gods and goddesses, another station, holding the level of the gods and goddesses. This is cosmology, Hindu cosmology. Greek and Rome had it, and other countries had it too. So as you come out through these apertures, from Om you would see the Trinity in the cosmic mind, and that would be the subtlest form that you could imagine, that you could envision. You're coming down into the realm of the Trinity now, and you'd like shake hands with Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and then say, I'm going forward now. I'm going to follow the light of Sattva beaming out of the Trinity, and the next thing I'm going to encounter is the realm of the sages and seers and saints and rishis. And then after that, after seeing them, I will pass further out and I'll pass into the realm of the gods and goddesses. Then I'll pass further out into the realm of the ancestors, celestials and ancestors, and finally find myself viewing human couples. From a disembodied state, I'm viewing human couples, and I'm going to choose my parents. So I choose my parents, and then hopefully I have enough power not to get into the fetus right away, but to stay and waiting for just before the gestation period is done and before the fetus gets pushed out of the womb, then identify with the fetus and get pushed out into the world, and here I am, you see. Now a soul that does that consciously almost doesn't have to worry about getting lost. You see, they know these amber stairs of birth and death, like Sri Aurobindo called them, like the back of their hand. So when they come down to earth, even though the Maya is very thick, you're encountering the covering power, aren't you? You're encountering the problem of form. Now you've taken it on. And everyone who gets into form thinks form is real. Very few know that form is not real. Formlessness is real. So the further you get into form, the more you forget your formless nature. So you're beginning to forget about Brahman, you're beginning to forget about the Trinity, you're beginning to forget about the gods and goddesses, and probably forget about your ancestors until your grandparents tell you about them. Oh, you're in the line of generations, and I'll tell you about my grandfather and his grandfather and his father's father and so forth. Then all of a sudden you become aware that, oh, you have a kind of lineage in form. And of course, beings who are spiritually illumined, they have a lineage in religious and spirituality. They have a lineage that goes back into gurus, back into preceptors, back into saints and seers, and even back to the avatars. Some of them, Avatars Apr, like those 12 apostles of Christ and those 8 apostles of Buddha and those 16 apostles of Sri Ramakrishna, direct disciples in this day and age, they have a lineage that they can remember. So they have the advantage there. I come from there. Now, most beings will say, I come from matter, because when they see matter, the covering power of form is so dense, Maya, Prakriti, so dense, that they immediately identify with it. It's also very alluring. If I could take the camera and just walk out with all of the live streaming audience and show you the beauty of nature here in Hawaii, you'd say, gee, I wish I was there. I wish I was living on some land somewhere, eating papaya and cottage cheese this morning, like my nephew here did, living in a paradise, you see. So the power of nature and form is very alluring. Souls get attracted to it, and they get identified with it, and then they get attached to it. And that's, of course, where the yogi won't go. He can stand back and say how beautiful, but he's not going to identify with form, because he knows that's a covering power. And the covering power can turn into what's called the distorting power, you might have noticed. Formlessness is pure and perfect, like in deep sleep tonight. You have no ego, you have no house, you have no money, you have no worries. You just have peace. Now you just have to be conscious of that peace. But if you come out of that balanced state, then you're encountering restlessness, you're encountering active mind, the active mind of all these beings that we've just accounted for back in the heavens within us. And they're all working, they're all mentally projecting. It's a huge mind out there working that's manufacturing all of this. Right on down to the tree and the leaf. It's manufactured out of the mind. And it doesn't take 4 billion years to do it. It's there when you awake and it's gone when you're in deep sleep. So this taking on of form, embodiment, incarnation, reincarnation, is a very sobering thing to the person who's about to attempt it. And they're doing it as a yagya, a sacrifice. Most beings have no idea that they're doing it as a sacrifice, even if they are. Some of them are coming here just to suffer for their karmas. Some of them are coming here just to have pleasure. They think pleasure is the highest goal. So their past lifetimes have been spent seeking pleasure, so this lifetime is also going to be spent seeking pleasure. Those pleasure lovers. So there are many different reasons for souls to be born here. So these unique souls called avatars, there's only one purpose to be embodied, and actually they're not even thinking of it as being embodied. Rather like an octopus sending out one of its arms with tentacles on it to feel in the darkness, feel what the landscape is like around it. Just like that, the avatar is sending out one of its avatars. The Brahman is sending out one of its avatars to feel the gross realms of name and form, and see how many are ready to renounce that, to give those up, particularly the suffering involved in it, how to transcend it. And this is the difference between, say, religion and spirituality. Those beings who are seeking enlightenment are seeking spirituality. And those people who are seeking morality and so forth are seeking religion, basically. So there's a stage beyond religion and morality called dharma, and there's a stage beyond dharma called sadhana. That's practice, spiritual practice. And then sadhana leads to the attainment of spirituality. So that's a threefold dimension that most beings don't know about. They get as far as religion, and that's it. Oh, now we're saved and we can go to heaven. But we just told you what heaven was like. You came through the heavens as you came out into the body, and they weren't that great. There were at least 3 or 4 other stations that were higher than heaven, according to the Hindu cosmology, to the tradition, that the seers have seen. They themselves, the Dalai Lamas, the Swami Vivekanandas, the various illumined souls, when they give up this body, they're not going to their ancestors, and they're not going to the heavens. They're going to go to that realm of the seers, where seers go. The seers mean people who see the truth, and they're not going to give up the truth for anything. If thine eye has been made single, you're not going to take on the 2 eyes again and trade in this 3rd eye for those 2. In other words, duality is has pretty much died for you, and wherever you go, it's going to be a matter of singularity, oneness, homogeneity, or Advaita, which is the name of our third class today of Advaita of the Avatars. So we were in the midst of this kind of teaching when we showed you these two charts and ended last week in Honoka at the ashram here in Hawaii, SRV ashrams. So we can pick them up now. Remember, we had been going through these 14 stages. A question came up in the meantime, are these the dasa bhumikas? Because you see, and I redid this chart for you during the week because it was missing these two entries. Here's the agyana bhumikas. Jnana is knowledge, so agyana would be ignorance. So this is 7 levels of ignorance that the soul is involved in. So here's how the soul, animalistic soul, ignorant soul, worldly soul, finally the intelligent soul. Even the intelligent soul isn't that high. It has to go beyond its own intelligence in order to reach religion, spirituality, and mastership and superconsciousness. So this whole chart we looked at basically, in fact, we can start out the teaching with that quote. I don't think we took it last week, but Sri Ramakrishna put it very nicely. He says, the jiva, that means embodied soul, like we've just described, a person who came out from formlessness into form. The jiva first remains in a state of ignorance. It is not conscious of God, but of matter and multiplicity. The 2 M's, matter and multiplicity. So I want things made of matter, and I want lots of them. It's basically what the ignorant soul is after. The more varieties I can have, the better. So if you're in Hawaii with its how many varieties of mango? 100 and some, probably 108, as far as we know. Then you're in a place of mango heaven, you see. And you'll be happy there eating mangoes for a while. So multiplicity, many varieties, many species, many kinds of foods, many kinds of activities. That's what he's saying here. The soul is first in a state of ignorance. Now we showed that here, Bindu Jagrat. It's in a state of incipient ignorance, and it's working its way up towards higher thinking, which would be here on the map called intelligence. So on this map, hopefully you're up here somewhere. Those star maps that say you are here, the arrow pointed to one of those stars. Well, these are all like inner stars. Imagine them as inner planes of existence of your mind, kingdoms of heaven within you, and find out where you are and what you need to gain, spiritually speaking. If you're anywhere in the jnana bhumikas, then you're on a higher level. If you're anywhere in the agyana bhumikas, then you're still working on root ignorance, dispelling it, getting rid of it, getting it behind you. Get thee behind me, as Christ was saying. So he says, at first, the soul is not conscious of God, but of matter and multiplicity. It only notices the many things around it. But upon attaining knowledge, it becomes conscious that God dwells in all beings. On attaining higher wisdom, it discards both knowledge and ignorance and talks of nothing but God day and night. So 3 very distinct states Ramakrishna is describing in 3 sentences, or 2 sentences there. First, the incipient state of ignorance. It just knows nothing but many varieties, and that's all it's interested in. Then it encounters people, but it encounters people's souls. So people are marvelous, you see. They're really amazing. They're deep thinkers. There are good friends. See, there are holy people even here amongst us. How wonderful. And so they become aware that God is dwelling in people, whether you want to put it in that particular way or not. They're seeing consciousness. They're seeing awareness. They're seeing higher intelligence. And so they get attracted to that and they get fascinated with it. And that's a kind of knowledge about the soul being apparently fragmented amongst many, many people. See, that level of person is still thinking many people. He's not thinking one soul divided into many parts yet. So he says, when he discards both knowledge and ignorance, he'll talk about nothing but God day and night. So basically, then has reached a level of awareness where he says, oh, I see, it's just God playing in many forms. It's a kind of sport that consciousness is undertaking. And you can see that a person who is making a shift from ignorant to knowledgeable to transcendent, if you want to put it that way, there's nothing changing outside. The change is all taking place in his own head, isn't it? First he's ignorant, but it's the same Brahman there. Then he's knowledgeable, but it's the same Brahman there. And then he's transcended. Oh, it's the same Brahman there, you see. Nothing changed externally, even in the physical world, because the physical world lasts for 4,320,000,000 years, so am I going to wait around that long to see if anything changes? It's all change, all the time. But what doesn't change is that one single Brahman existing in everything. So that's where he gets to that stage where he wants to think and talk about nothing but God all the time, like this fool here. He wants to get in front of a camera and tell everyone about it, you see. And hopefully generate some fire of yoga in you, that you'll want to do some practice and refine yourself and not be satisfied with multiplicity or diversity, or even shallow oneness, because there's a kind of shallow oneness that's going around in New Age circles. You see, I'm all right, you're all right. That's not the best mantra, because nothing's all right out there when everything's changing. The only all right is here in my own immortal self. And that's only true when I abide in my immortal self. If I venture out and forget this immortal self, then I'm at the hands of Maya and every dirty trick it has to pull on you. Suffering, misery. People all of a sudden aren't divine anymore, they're devils. And it's not my fault anymore, it's their fault. You see, so many things happen inside the mind that doesn't remain focused in its own awareness. Like that avatar who came out from Brahman and kept his awareness all the way down. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, when he came out of non-dual samadhi and took on a body, he was 9 years old when he had his first samadhi. He saw some white cranes flying across a black storm cloud that was gathering. And the scene so impressed him that he fell over and had samadhi. To him it was souls, pure white souls, leaving Maya or separating themselves from Maya. And so he had this profound samadhi at 9 years old, and they had to carry him back to the village and nurse him back to awareness. So an avatar and the Advaita of the avatars that we're talking about today is something they come armed with. It's just lurking behind the surface. Sri Ramakrishna said, what I mean by that is, you might say Gadadhar there, the little Ramakrishna, before he was called Ramakrishna, was just a child, like other children, you see. He had a few distinguishing characteristics, but when he started showing this incredible capacity for spiritual life at a very young age, then you'd have to say, well, this is not an ordinary child. This might be someone of a divine descent. He's got the markings of a very auspicious soul across his countenance, you see. And so that being, as he or she grows up, Holy Mother was growing up in the village just 1.5 miles away from Ramakrishna, you see. A couple decades later, she was born, and then they were growing up. She was growing up next to that same village that Ramakrishna had grown up in. So these souls, when they take on the body, their consciousness of samadhi is just behind the surface. Sri Ramakrishna used to explain that. He said, some beings' gold, he means their soul, their gold is buried under mounds of earth and you have to dig for days to get to it. That's a very ignorant person who's been pressed down by Maya. But other people's souls, other people's gold is just right beneath the surface. You just brush away a few pebbles with your hands. You don't even need a shovel. And there's the gold shining, you see. So he meant that's like these great souls who remember their consciousness as soon as they get in the body. So those are beings that Ishvara Kotis would look for. They're waiting for that soul to come into the body. They're born for that. They have some inkling of when that soul is going to be born. So it's no coincidence that the 12 apostles of Christ were living along the river about the time John the Baptist came along. That's not a coincidence. Other things may be coincidental in their life, but that's not. They're born there for that purpose, and they're waiting to become fishers of men. That's their purpose. But their gold is buried under a few feet of earth, you see. Christ has to come and tell them, fishes and loaves and rivers and nets and wives won't do it. You have to have something else. You have to have a spiritual life. Let me show you what that's like. And then he awakens them. I have a chart I brought about awakening. Diksha it's called in our tradition. How a soul gets awakened by some maybe 10 or 12 different kinds of diksha. I'll show you that in a minute. Sometimes even by a touch from a soul like that can awaken a person. We have that on record with Sri Ramakrishna touching the young Naren, Swami Vivekananda, when he was just a teenager. And Naren said the whole world went away at that touch, and he cried out and said, "What are you doing to me? I have my parents at home." He got totally surprised by the Paramahamsa, who just touched him on the chest or on the head, and with this kind of hasta diksha, and went into the state. And then Sri Ramakrishna asked him questions. "Are you the soul I brought with me? What's your purpose here on earth? What are you doing here?" and so forth. Ask him these questions while he was in that state. And then he came down out of that state, and he was Naren again. He said, "What did that fakir do to me? He won't catch me napping again. Next time I come and see him, you see, he won't do that to me. How can he do that to my consciousness? I'm a practical man. I know what I'm about." Next time he came and visited Ramakrishna, the same thing happened. Ramakrishna touched him. So there's these ways of awakening that happen with very powerful souls. Sometimes they call it these days Shaktipat. But Shaktipat, of course, is being used in a way that's not all that healthy if it's been used in a way that's called premature awakening. If it's done just as a sensational thing, or becomes a sort of phenomena that people are looking for. Oh, I think I'll go back to my guru and get that touch of ecstasy again, instead of doing it under my own steam. So that's why I said this earlier this morning, that the avatar usually helps those people who are lost cases. They're already lost and they have no way of getting free. They're so immured in Maya that they'll never be able to get free under their own auspice. So he comes and helps them. They're called the fallen and the lowly ones. And he helps those ones who are just about to get enlightenment. But all those ones in between, he usually won't do that to. This has been sort of the observation we've made in the Ramakrishna order by looking at Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa's life in the 1800s. He'll leave you to your own devices and just teach you, give you these teachings. And then you take the teachings, it's a transmission, right? And then you take the transmission and you take it in and you work out your own salvation. That's how Vivekananda put it. All beings must work out their own salvation. So in a few cases of those beings who are lost, and also those ones who are just about to get enlightenment, the avatar might use that kind of power. So it's not a Shaktipat thing, is what I'm saying, that's just done on a whim, you see, or to prove some sort of occult power or something. It's a very precious thing, and quite rare when it's used in the right way. We'll look at that in a minute. So this quote starts us off showing us sort of three levels of being. The ignorant being, the being who's got knowledge, and the being who's got transcendence. And that's been, let's go to this chart for a second, because we were there last week. You see how the soul starts in root ignorance, goes up a station to awareness of individuation, ego, moves up a state and begins to understand that he's having different births. He's ignorant and he doesn't know. He's getting inklings. Sometimes they call it deja vu or something. He's getting these experiences that are extraordinary, that are sensual. They're beyond the senses. And he's beginning to get them in dreams. So you can see up the left-hand side of the chart here, your left, these words, Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti. Now, any Vedantist who sees those three words thinks waking, dreaming, deep sleep. Oh, we're talking about the Advaitas here and how they're explaining to you, free of religious denomination, free of any baggage, the three basic states of your consciousness, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. And how you're shifting between these three every 24-hour period, generally speaking. So you can see how he's putting it in terms of a person who's awake but still sleeping. You've heard that expression, I'm sure. Kind of like the Walking Dead, you see. Their eyes are open, but they're still completely blind. There are songs that actually sing that. Oh soul, you move about the world with your eyes open, but you remain completely blind. That's a line out of a song of India. So waking here means waking to the waking state of gross objects only. And then dreaming comes next as a kind of relief from that, really. People are getting a relief from waking state because waking state is put upon by suffering, by hunger, by thirst, by delusion, by desire, by attachment, and these dangers, these weights of Maya. So waking state, they want to escape it, so they sleep. They pretend away. You see all of the devil's doing, as they say. And then deep sleep happens too. That's happening at this last level, 7th level of ajnana, 7th level of ignorance. It's a nice way of dividing up levels of ignorance. Just like you can divide up levels of knowledge, you can divide up levels of ignorance and see where people are stationed. It's the soul's journey through ignorance to knowledge, through knowledge to transcendence, to freedom, to enlightenment. And great souls have mapped it out. They can see it happening. And they know where any given soul is in that journey. Now, I mentioned earlier that someone had asked about the dasa bhumikas of Buddhism, because the word's the same, bhumika. The dasa bhumikas of Buddhism are 10 lands for the bodhisattva. So they'd be starting at a very high level here. The bodhisattva gets free, and then he begins to try to attain Buddhahood. Bodhisattvahood is not Buddhahood yet. It's not full enlightenment. It's freedom from ignorance. And he has a certain amount of freedom now, so then he's going to move inward and master these levels of consciousness called the 10 dasa bhumikas in Buddhism. So don't get confused between the two systems. However, you can really kind of correlate them. Because at these higher levels here, as we talk about them, especially Turiya, are very much in alignment with bodhisattvahood and jivan. We call it jivan mukti. These are important words. If you're using a word like avatar, then you should probably also use a word ishvarakoti. Those are the ones who attend upon the avatar, the direct disciples. And then the jivan muktas, those are the free beings who have been freed by the avatar, or who are doing the avatar's work in the body. And then other special words like that too are happening. So those Sanskrit words provide us a vocabulary that we don't have in English to explain levels of spiritual enlightenment that we don't even think about. We probably don't know about them because we don't have words for them. If we did have words for them, then all of a sudden we would say, well, what's that mean? You see, a word means there must be a meaning to it. So we were somewhere in that crust, is that upper crust of ignorance, where we were working our way through it, watching the soul get out. And we saw that at Swapna Jagrat, that is, he began to recall events long past, and he began to render his waking state lucid. That's mastering the A of Om, A-U-M. You projected the creation, now you have to get in there and master it. You can't just get in there and lose yourself. It's basically what they're saying. You have to get in there and see it as a creation. A creation means a projection, and a projection means something unreal. When the mind projects things, they're not real. They're like mirages in a desert. Science has shown you that these things aren't real. They're not really forms, are they? They're masses of particles. So what's keeping you from jumping to the final conclusion that what I'm seeing there is not really ultimately real? It's not actual. My senses are telling me it is because I can feel the leaves, I can smell the leaves, I can taste the leaves, touch the leaves, I can hear the leaves rustling in the wind. But I'm beginning to suspect that maybe the senses aren't giving me the full reading of what an object is, or what it isn't. Would be a better way of putting it. So when a person begins to recall events long past and remembers events in a dream and begins to examine events in a dream, then he's beginning to render his waking state lucid and begin to do the same to his dreaming state. Now he's coming out of his dreams and going, well, that was profound. Instead of coming out of his dreams saying, that was silly. See? 1,000 imbecilities of the mind, they call the ignorant man's dreams, or the 1,000 imbecilities of the mind. There's an expression for it again. But when the soul starts having those profound dreams that are connected in to as many lifetimes he's had, then he's on the trail of something very, very path-like. A path is opening up for him inwardly that can lead him to these kingdoms of heaven and beyond. Now, if you go up one step, he gets to this place called Sushupti, which means deep sleep. It's the last level of ignorance for the man. Let's see, or the soul, the woman. The soul has no gender, so when you say man and woman, you're pretty much talking about the soul, the mind soul. At the level of Sushupti, the last level of ignorance, he realizes that all states are beset with pain, and he perceives all worlds as Maya. You couldn't put it any more clearly than that according to the opinion or the teachings of the Indian seers. He's examined things in a dream, he's examined his waking state, and he sees that it's all ephemeral or transitory. It's all changing, it's all empty. However you want to put that, it's an illusion. It's all attracting and it makes me attached to it. But these very things that are making me attached are stolen, they're decaying, they're changing, and they're not fulfilling me. That's pretty much the acid test in the end. Do these things fulfill me? Yes, maybe for 10 or 20 years or a couple lifetimes if I'm a pleasure seeker. But I find out eventually that nothing can satisfy me but something very inward, something very personal, something ultra-personal, that feeling of the heart that's calling us. The song of the heart is calling us, the song of victory, as Lord Vashishta put it in his scripture. So that's a very profound level of ignorance. Almost a contradictory term, but you could say that's profound ignorance. Hey man, that's really profound ignorance that you saw your past lifetimes. Because the past lifetimes are not real either, because this lifetime is not real. You're dreaming. And you haven't awakened yet. That's why they're called waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, because they're all forms of dream. And the things they're attached to are all empty. This is the acid-like teaching of Buddhism and Vedanta, and yoga too, by the way. Tantra puts it a little bit more friendly, but in the end, Tantra is saying the same thing. So, if a person pierces through this crust, this dark line here, you might as well call it the Brahma Granthi or the Vishnu Granthi. It's a membrane between the third chakra and the fourth chakra, is basically how you could put it. There's a subtle membrane there that people cannot pierce through. It throws them back into rebirth, throws them back to their ancestors, to the humans. And they go in rounds and circles like a tempest in a teapot inside of these three lower chakras. One of the avatars, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, said, I won't go there. I can only go this low. I can't go down to these three lower chakras. Now, he meant by way of identification. Of course, he could fish people out of them if he wanted and attract them to him, maybe, in certain cases. So this membrane here is, you can feel it in meditation. It's called the cloud of nations. It's called the cloud of unknowing, or the curtain of nations. There are words for it, again. There are phrases for it in Sanskrit and transliterated into English that make you aware that there's some problem here that's not letting me get to my heart, if you want to put it in just very straightforward terms. It's not letting me to get and live in my heart. I sometimes pierce through it and I'm in my heart for a while, but I'm pulled back down by some elastic tether, just right back down to these lower chakras. But when I finally pierce through that completely, I see the light. Now, that's Ramakrishna's own words. He said, when a person arrives at this chakra, he says, "Oh, what is this? What is this?" And he sees a great light. That's a direct quote from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, how Ramakrishna explains the piercing through that membrane of ignorance, which is right there, and getting higher knowledge, which is right there in that second sentence. So it happens to souls, and they all of a sudden feel greatly uplifted, freed from the trammels and vicissitudes of Maya. They're not out of Maya yet, they've actually come to Mahamaya. That is, the mother's teachings. I was saying this morning in satsang, one of the great teachings of the Gita is, you must come to know the end of wisdom in truth. Krishna tells Arjuna, you must come to know the end of wisdom in truth. So the person at that level he's speaking is this person who is gathering knowledge, has done away with ignorance with knowledge, and hasn't yet arrived at non-dual truth yet. He's just using wisdom to propel himself along, and that's what these early stages here of the Jnana Bhumikas are. Stages 1, 2, 3, or if you want to put them 10, 11, and 12, if you count 14. Let's look at those. Subhecha, attraction to the path of indifference. And that's where we left off last week. You get an attraction to the path of indifference, which means indifferent to the evil of things, indifferent to those who are enemies of enlightenment, who are enemies of God, who are trapped in worldliness. So you can't strew pearls before swine. Every great avatar knows that, so they just put the truth out there and have the attraction. Those people who are attracted to it in that lifetime, those are the people they'll save. But remember, there's other beings around that are already saved. The avatar isn't the only illumined soul on earth when it comes. There are other great souls there that are helping it. Remember, Sri Ramakrishna said it's like a great ocean liner passing along the leaving port, and it leaves this huge wake of waves. Those waves are other great souls that have been inspired, re-inspired, rejuvenated by the avatar's presence. Everything will take a turn towards evolution. Science will start to evolve, medicine will start to evolve, arts and music and sciences will start to evolve after an avatar has come. There's a huge progress on the world level being made. You can see it if you look at the accepted avatars, what happened just after they passed away from the body, other souls that came and teachings that were given. So this passive indifference means indifference to all of those who would act as weights, all those things and people who would act as weights to your further awakening. This is why people have to sometimes depart from their families, because they're not ready yet. That's why Christ said, they say I've come to bring peace, but actually I've come to bring a sword. And with this sword I'll separate father from son-in-law, mother from daughter. So he knows that some beings are being weighed down, and some beings will never awaken in this lifetime. So he comes and he separates the two, and sends some towards truth and leaves other in the world. Grant unto Caesar what is Caesar's, right? Well, they want the world, they get the world, until they finally wake up to understand that the world is unreal, empty, illusory, non-satisfying, non-fulfilling. repetitious, passing through many cycles, endless cycles, doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then they want what's new and what's fresh. I mean, that's one positive angle to the Westerners. They want what's new all the time. They want new foods, new restaurants, new clothes, new guru, you see, new teachings. So they'll hop around from here to there to get those things. That's not a very good positive trait, but the positive side of it is that if you're looking for something really new, how about transcending reincarnation? That's really new and fresh. That's the most radical thing you can do. Other people go, I'd never thought of that, you see. How does that happen? How does one get that? And if that question is asked, the avatar will turn his attention on that person and say, I'll tell you how to get it, follow me. Oh, first you must give up the world. Didn't Jesus tell the rich man that? First you have to give up your money. He was attracted, the rich man. He heard the ring of truth in those teachings of Christ, but he couldn't go home and give away all his things. Sri Ramakrishna's life, speaking of Jesus and Ramakrishna, are avatars that are 2,000 years apart, roughly, right? And Ramakrishna told the story of the man who had a dozen wives. And, he came out of the shower one day with his towel and his cloth around him. That's all he had. And his wife said, "You're a lazy good-for-nothing." See, he had just one wife. And he says, your neighbor up there has 12 wives and he's decided he's going to give them all up, one at a time. And the man said, he'll never be able to do it. I'll show you how to do it. And he left. He never came back. So that's a teaching like Christ telling the rich man, go away and give away all your things and then you can follow me. Because if you follow me the way you are now, those things will pull on you. You'll want to come back when the going gets rough. And believe me, the going will get rough when you give up everything. It might not be rough for you, but the world around you changes its face. It starts to show an ugly face to you. Misery loves company, right? People don't like to see someone renounce the world. Certainly parents don't like to see a child renounce the world. Unless they're dharmic parents. And there are precious few of those around who will say, yes, go, follow your spiritual life. What's schooling? What's any of that? What's money making? You don't have to take care of me when I'm old. See the hidden agenda of parents. They want to wrap you up in Maya the way they're wrapped up in Maya. So if a soul shows an inkling to get free, if there's no sannyas, if there's no monastic institution, if there's no ashram in the society, then they end up taking drugs. Their parents say, take this drug, it'll make you feel better. Or let's get you married, quick. That even happened to Sri Ramakrishna. His mother saw him getting too spiritual and having samadhi, so he said, let's get you married. Ramakrishna was ready for that. He said, oh, well, my bride is marked with a straw in the next village. So the parents went there all happy. Oh boy, he didn't put up a fight. He's actually going to get married. And they found this little 3 or 4-year-old girl. And that was his wife. So he was ready. He was ready, you see. So he married Sharda when she was, 5 or 6 or something. Of course, they don't consummate the marriage. She didn't see him again in that way until she was 18 and went to Calcutta to find him in his 30s as the priest of Dakaneshwar temple, the Kali priest. So, meanwhile, she saw him occasionally when he came back to visit the village because, as I said, their villages were a mile apart. But those teachings of the avatars, you can look and measure them one against the other throughout those 500-year spans, 500, 600, 700-year spans. You can find that they're all saying the same thing in different words according to their society and the times and the people they're teaching. You can find the direct correlations in that. And it's wonderful, because what you're actually seeing is that there's not many avatars that come many times, and there's not one avatar that comes once. There's one avatar that comes many times. They're the same being. It couldn't be otherwise if you know your Advaita, Hence my title, Advaita of the Avatars. It's rather a dichotomy. There aren't many avatars, there's just one. So it's actually not that difficult to present their teachings and to show the correlations between them. And it all has to do with spiritual evolution, however you may put it. I have several other ways to show you how that growth is actuated and quickened by the presence of a guru or a sage or a seer, especially an avatar. Because those beings should be living exemplars of spiritual life. And if you like spiritual life and you're ready for it, you'll gravitate towards it quickly. If you don't, you'll run in the opposite direction, as many people do. Now, we said the path of indifference comes. So it's a detachment. It's not a callousness. We don't want to mistake it for that, because the Jnani is actually loving humanity and the world more when he's in knowledge than he was when he was in ignorance. He found out when he looks back that he loved the world for all the wrong reasons when he was in ignorance. So now he gets to this level and he begins to look like maybe he's indifferent to other beings, but he's actually, because he's loving them more in a more impersonal way. He's beginning to see their essence and not their bodies and minds and so forth. And he will use that newfound knowledge to help illumine himself and others. And he'll do that in a very unpretentious way, in a very natural, spontaneous way. The wearing of knowledge, the cloth of knowledge, you put it on and it becomes you. See? In other words, here, we talk of nothing but God day or night. If you don't want to be around a person like that, you're welcome to leave. But if you like what you hear, you'll come and listen, hopefully for years, until you hear that one thing expressed in just the right way, at just the right moment, that will click and awaken you. And that's what all of this is about, that's coming. Let's look at it. He desires to enjoy Jnana essence, Atma Gyan, Lord Vashishta called it in the earliest times in India. Knowledge of the Atman, not knowledge of science, knowledge of arithmetic, knowledge of music, knowledge of this and that. Those are lower sciences, those are fine. He's probably already been through that and done that. Now he's getting a newfound appreciation for and thirst for, not the things of the world, for knowledge, for wisdom, right? He's beginning to see ignorance and get rid of it by knowledge. Ramakrishna put that, if you get a thorn in your hand, you take a thorn off the same bush, dig that thorn out with the first thorn, throw them both away. See? Ignorance is the thorn in your hand, knowledge is the thorn that you get to dig it out with, but guess what? Both thorns came off the same bush, called Maya. Ignorance is an illusion, knowledge is an illusion. You are non-dual. You have nothing to do with dualities, virtue and vice, pleasure and pain, knowledge and ignorance. This is your dream. You're dreaming duality. You're taking the covering power and form and playing with it. Machinations, sleight of hand, prestidigitation, presto changeo. Zim salabim. Open the sesame. It's interesting, if you opened the sesame seed, you'd find a lot of oil in it. Who would have thunk there'd be oil in one tiny little sesame seed? But to get that oil out, you have to grow a bunch of sesame plants, harvest millions of seeds, invent a press the seeds to get just a glass of oil so that you can analyze it, find out its nutritious power and so forth. Who's going to go through all that trouble just to get sesame oil? But give the human being enough time, they'll do that. And that's just an analogy. Basically, they're going to want to press that sesame seed of knowledge. There are many, many atoms of knowledge in your mind, just like there are many, many millions of atoms of matter in objects. Now you have to switch the level of your vibration from that gross vibration to this subtle vibration, from waking to dreaming, from dreaming to deep sleep, if you want to put it in that way, and master your consciousness. There's nothing like that. There's nothing as great as mastering your own consciousness. That's a yogi. fully masterful yogi. See here? First, animalistic is the gross level. People who are animalistic in ignorance. Then you get worldly and it's at a primal level. Then you get some intelligence, it's at a vital level. Then you get religious and it's at an ethereal level, heavens and so forth. Then you get spiritually awakened for your first time and it's celestial. Then you become a practitioner, not just awakened, but you begin to practice, to refine it, and you get to a cosmic level. Then you become an adept at spiritual life and it's at a divine level. Finally, you become a master and it's at a universal level. Then you find these people like avatars who are past masters and it's at a superconscious level. In other words, here, Danir Grahitva Upanishadam Mahastram Sharam Hupasanishita Sanjayata Ayamya Tad Bhavakatena Chitasa Laksham Tadevaksharam Somya Vidti, the nectar of wisdom, right? So it means, just like Krishna, like Shiva here, handing the arrow, you see, off to Ram. This is basically means with the intellect made sharpened by thoughts on reality alone. Take the bow of the Upanishads and the teachings and aim that arrow at Brahman and release and penetrate the mark. So this is all these arrows, you see. You're being taught how to sharpen your intellect so that it can penetrate through ignorance, Maya, name and form, appearances. Because if you don't, suffering, misery, and disease will come, and you won't be able to deal with it. Most likely suffering, misery, and disease will come anyway, but at least you'll be able to deal with it if you're a yogi. Because as we were saying today in satsang, early morning satsang, forbearance is the default zone of the wise. They know how to forbear things, and they know how to keep their mind in higher levels of consciousness when things get rough. When things get tough, the tough get going. You see, it was something like that, the saying, you see. Now, also here at the Subhechya level, is seeks the guidance of an illumined soul. All great teachers, including the avatars, by the way, took teachers. They were already spiritually enlightened past masters, so why did they need to take teachers? To keep their mind wiped clean for the best vision of God and to act as an example for others, that they need teachers. Otherwise, like in the West here, you'll give root to arrogance. Oh, I can do it on my own. Do you realize how difficult it is to get spiritual enlightenment? Especially in an age where no one's looking for it? Where the trail that was blazed thousands of years ago is now overcovered with weeds and we can't even see it anymore? It's very difficult. Sri Ramakrishna had a story for that. He said, a man was walking through a neighborhood and he saw a beautiful house and he wanted to see the view from the roof of that house. Now, how can he get up on that roof? Can he just go there and climb up the drain and get himself on the roof? Probably the owner's not going to like that, come out with a shotgun, you see. So he's going to have to call, come knocking, ask the man, can I get up on your roof? Which probably isn't going to go over very good. Why do you want on my roof? So then if he gets permission, he has to go and get some ladders and straps and things that will support him up there. They won't fall, ways to get up, and use them, learn how to use them. So he's got a lot of work to do to get up to that roof, on all levels. Physical, emotional, psychological. So you need a teacher is what the teaching is. These souls, like Ramakrishna, he took teachers because he loved to find God through every path. Now that's a very rare being, you have to admit, who wants to find God through all paths. And that's the difference between a spiritual master and a past master. A spiritual master has found God through one path. And they can teach you how to get enlightened. They're very, very illumined souls. But a past master is universal. It's gone beyond universal to the superconscious, you see. And now, if he comes back in the form, one of the things he's going to do is search out God through every path possible, in full view of human consciousness. In other words, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of souls looking on to what Ramakrishna did, and also to what the direct disciples did, whom he left behind, that wake of that great ship. They're also going to go out, and like Vivekananda did here, and brought this wisdom to us in the late 1800s. So that's all very, very much based on what's called Guru Parampara, the transmission of wisdom through a line of gurus, right on down to you yourself getting that teaching. Now also here, studies Atmagyan scriptures. That's going to go together. Not the ordinary scriptures that deal with moral issues and so forth only, but those that deal with the identification between the apparently individualized soul and the Supreme Soul. How do I bring those two together? And as I bring them together, this one in form is going to become formless. You see, it's going to have to shed its form. It's going to have to shed its body, it's going to have to shed its energy, it's going to have to shed its conceptions, its mind, and it's going to have to shed its fear of death. All those things are going to go away the closer you get to the avatar. It's like the closer you get to the ocean, the less clothes you're going to be wearing by the time you get there. I'm almost there. I think I'll take off my shirt, you see. I'm almost there. Now my pants. I've only got my trunks left, you see. So you're about ready to jump in, and you're in anticipation of it. So the closer you get to avatar, the more you're shedding all this baggage, as they say, these weights. And it's going to be a necessity until, if you're a rich man and you come in the presence of Christ, he's going to say, well, now you have to give up your wealth too. Shed that, please. And then I can teach you. What we had to shed with my teacher was the original sin. He yelled at me when he first saw me. It was a nice greeting. So, if you believe in original sin, get out of this ashram. I can't teach you. I said, Swami, I don't believe in original sin. I believe in eternal perfection. He goes, oh good, come in, I can teach you. So he went from a frown to a smile in about 2 seconds. So what I had to shed, or what he wanted to make sure the Westerners shed when he came to a Hindu path, was the belief in original sin. That's untenable to him. It's unacceptable. It's not working, hasn't worked. If you take it symbolically, maybe you can find room for it, philosophically speaking, but not taken literally, for sure. And then after that, the thing you're going to have to shed in the presence of a teacher like that is the 7-day creation theory. Why? Because Brahman's not a creator. God does not create. So you get your P's and Q's together. You get your T's crossed and your I's dotted when you go in front of a master like that. You see, anything that's been hanging out in your mind that's unworthy gets shed, gets burnt away, and then you have kyati, clarity, and you leave the ashram and say, I'm clear again. The painter goes on painting different colors, dipping his brush in the water, cleaning it off, painting with new colors. The jar of water becomes just thick, like brown, almost black. He drops a little bit of alum in it, and it clears up right away. If he wants clear water again, just a little bit of alum, poof, the whole thing turns clear again in a minute. So Ramakrishna used that teaching. The minute you get into the presence of a teacher like that, 1 minute is 1 lifetime. You should shed everything that's unworthy in you in 1 lifetime. Vivekananda said, how about 6 months? If you're really on fire. We used to go around to different groups of people, our founder, Lex Dixon, and myself, and whenever we went into a group of people, he'd take me aside to say, that one there is on fire. That one over there is on fire. He would look for those who are on fire, and he'd go and single them out and talk with them about Vedanta. He knew the ones that were ready to awaken, just by standing back detached and looking at a group. And so this is one of the accompanying qualities that comes to a soul who's shedding ignorance and gaining jnana. He's getting to the 7 upper stages of wisdom. Jnana bhumikas. Bhumika means ground, a level of ground. So you're stepping up. Vicharana has inquiry into the nature of reality, contemplation of the Atman, attainment of virtues, and increased spiritual aspirations. Those are all things that Vashishta told Ram at a very young age that happened at the level of Vicharana, the second level of the Jnana Bhumikas. Read them again. Inquiry into the nature of reality. We begin to ask the teacher, what is the nature of reality? In my way of thinking, he also asks, what's the nature of relativity? The problem is you don't want to get stuck on that question, because you can study relativity forever. Case in point, scientists, doctors, lawyers, businessmen, politicians, they're studying the unreal. The only thing, where's the dividing boundary? The seer and the sage are studying reality, aren't they? They're keeping their minds pinned on reality. Thoughts of God alone. Thoughts of God alone. Whether you say it in the Upanishads or whether an avatar comes to tell you, you put your thoughts on God alone, and that's reality. And relativity will then go away by itself. In fact, relativity will turn to reality in front of your very eyes. That's that spiritual alchemy that's going on. If you do the right kind of discrimination, you'll walk out of your teacher's ashram, out of the classes, and say, I'm seeing everything now with a single eye. It all looks different to me now. I understand. At that point, your teacher might say, okay, go away now. I have other fish to fry. And you'll have your last supper at that particular ashram. Now go and spread the teachings. Contemplation of the Atman is a precious thing. Before that, you didn't know you had a soul. Then you found out you had a soul. Then you found out there are people who could teach you how to get your soul. Now you can actually contemplate your own soul. Thank you very much for those 4 steps. It's not enough just to know that you're an eternal soul. That's just lip service. You can say that to anyone. Yes, we have an Atman. Yes, I know my Buddha nature. But to actually be able to contemplate it, you see, like Holy Mother said, I can take my Atman out from my wearing cloth anytime I want and look at it just as easily, just as easily as you would look at a fruit in the palm of your hand. So that's how precious that possession of your own self-nature is. Attainment of virtues is there. It means all virtues are already within you, really. I mean, you're just attaining them for yourself. You didn't know about them before. You thought you had to seek them outwardly. And in your seeking of them outwardly, you became confused and started seeking other things other than virtues. And started probably accumulating some vices too, which is the opposite of virtue. Now you find out, and this is the spiritual way, that all virtues lie within you. Kingdoms of heaven lie within you. Be thee perfect as thy Father in heaven is perfect, you see. So you find out that these things are inside of you and you lay your hands on it. In Buddhism and in yoga, that's called Dharma Megha Samadhi, the rain cloud of virtues. They actually have a way of describing it. Do you tell the rain, God, when to rain? Or does it just happen? It's the same in spiritual life. All of a sudden, if you've satisfied these criterion, virtues will come raining on you without you even asking them. Whereas before you were laboring yourself unto death to try and just get one of them. Oh, I wish I could be innocent, you see. I wish I could be pure. I wish I could be compassionate. See? All of a sudden, you're manned with all of these to the full extent. You don't see any difference between them and God. They're yours, and you're it. It's the greatest game of cosmic tag ever. You're it. The hand has been laid upon your own head. And then you get increased spiritual aspirations for what? Let's look at the next level. Tanu manasa. That means the mind has really become free of darkness. Freedom from desires, mastery of concentration, transcendence of mind, and freedom leading to the fourth state. The fourth state is sattva pati. The mind adheres to truth. It attains certitude of non-duality. That's a very precious thing. Now I know without a doubt, I and my Father are one. That's certitude of non-duality. Before you were just thinking, I'd sure like to be one with my Father, and they tell me I am, but I don't know it yet. Now you have certitude that the Supreme Soul and the apparently individual soul are one thing, and they can never be separated. You might be able to separate air. See, a little bit of air in there now, but I can't separate ether, can I? Ether can't be displaced. I can move an object. Air moves, but ether doesn't. Same ether that was there when I picked this up is there when the object moves. So ether is that analogy, the best metaphor for non-dual awareness. You can't displace it. You can't move it. You can't change it. And you learned that back here at Vicharana when you looked into the nature of reality. The teacher told you it's transformationless, it's birthless, it's deathless, it's eternal, and it's without divisions. And if he told you those four things and you understood them, you left as an adept or a master. See how quickly you ascend the ladder of enlightenment when you're ready for it, when you're receptive? Why wait? So mind adheres to truth at sattvapati level. Its intelligence gets illumined. It shines. Which has not quite yet happened yet. When you get that arrow sharpened and it penetrates through Maya, then you shine with your own intelligence. Before that, you're still dull. Sri Ramakrishna used to look at his direct disciples and he'd come in, oh, Naren is shining all the time. And one day he said, what's the matter, Naren? You're a little dull today. Oh, my meditations haven't been very good. Come here. And he touched him or wrote something on his tongue. You see. And next week he saw Naren, how's your meditations today? Great. They've been much better, thank you. I think that happened also to Rakal, Swami Brahmananda. So he is always doing this for his direct disciples, helping remove barriers so that they could move on their path. So we said attains certitude of non-duality, also transcends the gunas, which is a teaching on itself. Two gunas are restlessness, slothfulness, and balance. You actually go beyond all three. You get rid of slothfulness by restlessness, and you get rid of restlessness by balance. But you use balance to get triguna, tita, transcendent of all modes of nature. You might have noticed that nature is sometimes terrifying, other times very active, and other times peaceful. It has a changing phase. The mind is like that. Why not? Because nature came out of the mind. See the connection? They're all there. The gunas are all there, both in nature and in mind, because the two are one with each other. That is until the mind finally purifies itself and gets over nature. Kaivalya gets separated from nature, from the covering power of form. When it finally takes that on, it can now enjoy its Atman, you see, which is formless, by the way. Atman is not in nature. Nature is in the Atman. It just needs to realize that. And then you realize Jivan Mukta. That's the bodhisattvahood I was talking about of the Dasa Bhumikas in Buddhism. Right here is where Jivan Mukta means the living liberated soul. When he reaches that state of the Sattvapati means completely equanimous. Sorry. Equality of vision. Oh, yes, right. Equality of vision, and then reaches mature detachment. I jumped one. Reaches mature detachment. When he gets pure detachment, then he can go on to the Asam Shakti level, number 12. And there he merges in Atman, attains certitude of non-duality, transcends the gunas, and realizes Jivan Mukti. So when he gets to Jivan Mukti attainment, he's like a bodhisattva in Buddhism. Non-duality already having been a certitude, now he can enjoy it. He can express it through his life, and he can affect others with it too. Then, as we have about 5 or so minutes before we must take a break, so I'd like to finish this chart and move on after the break to our other charts that we've brought here for you to see. Some of them new. At the 13th level, or the 6th level of Jnana Bhumikas, wisdom lands, then you find out that the soul can now all of a sudden identify with consciousness alone. It sees nothing but Brahman and spends longer times in meditation of that reality. It sees Brahman in everything. Sri Ramakrishna said that's the last word in spiritual life on earth, is to see Brahman in everything. And there's a story about Swami Shardananda. When Sri Ramakrishna was passing, he granted boons to all the young disciples. And Swami Shardananda, my teacher's teacher, never asked for anything. So he called Sharat to him one day and said, Sharat, I've given everything I have to those who have asked for it, but you've never asked for anything. What do you want? And Swami Shardananda thought for a second and he said, I want to see God in everything. And Sri Ramakrishna said, you'll have to wait. That's a very, very high station. That's the highest thing in the land of relativity. See, in this life, it's the highest state. And so Shardananda said, I'm happy to wait for it. That's what I want. That's all I want. So you can see that was the soul probably identifying with that 13th level of Jnana Bhumikas, Ajnana Jnana Bhumikas. He was ready for that vision of seeing Brahman in everything. The only thing beyond that is Turiya, which is a famous word because it's the 4th state after waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, all of this. Then it jumps to Turiya. Turiya means the 4th. It's like somebody didn't want to give it a big grand name. They just said, when you transcend waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, and everything that goes on in that, because you can see that this gaining of wisdom is also kind of a dream. You thought you were ignorant, so you needed to get knowledge to get rid of an ignorance that was never really there. It's very, very strange. So you're awakening from a dream on grander and grander levels. This is why a spiritually adept master, these kinds of beings, it's no problem for them because they've already gotten rid of their ignorance long ago. So when they come back into the body, it's just a matter of seeing a teacher, hearing a mantra, and doing, a little meditation, and all of a sudden, poof, they're right back to where they were, where they left off, you see. Everything comes back to them naturally. But other souls have those mountains of ignorance, of past lifetimes and karma still piled high. So they're digging away each lifetime and hopefully not adding more to the mound as they dig. See, some people are digging away and throwing the dirt over their shoulder, but it's adding to the mound of karma behind them. So they think they're getting somewhere, you see. You don't want to be one of those. So if you're going to put forth effort in spiritual life, make sure it's done in the right way. Anyway, Turiya is after Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti, waking, dreaming, deep sleep. You get Turiya, means the 4th, means samadhi really. It's another word for samadhi, or non-dual abidance. It's another word for where the avatars are in Turiya. And that means that they abide in their self all the time. They rest in disembodied liberation. Here's a Jivan Mukta, right? But here's a Videha Mukta. Videha Mukta means never takes on a body again. unless it's their own sweet will to do so for some purpose. So that's rests in a disembodied state. Probably when Holy Mother said, Naran, Swami Vivekananda is like a wooden statue who meditates for 700 years at a time, she wasn't just saying that to say what a good meditator he was. That's probably actually the truth. He does leave the body, go into a conscious state, and for 700 years sit in meditation. What's 700 years in the scheme of 4,320,000,000 year cycles? Not very long. So, suffice to say, he's a very profound meditator, and he can live in a disembodied state in pure consciousness. Imagine the bliss of that. Imagine the wisdom of that. Imagine the existence of that. Sat Chidananda of that. See? And why he's that way when he comes back to earth. He's a past master. In the opinion of most of us in the Ramakrishna order, if Ramakrishna hadn't have come, Vivekananda could have easily been the avatar of the age. That's how much he's admired and assessed by illumined souls around him, of which there are thousands and thousands now. I mean, monks, I'm talking. Thousands and thousands of monks who follow Vivekananda. How did he do that? How did he convince young men to give up their lives? Young Hindu men, and some Americans and some Europeans. It's not an easy chore. It's like Christ saying to the rich man, right? Give up everything and follow me. He couldn't do it. But Vivekananda was able to do it with thousands of people. Amazing. So this is a very, very high level soul, fully realized consciousness. They call him, in fact, Ramakrishna himself, an avatar, called him a Nitya Siddha. Nitya, eternal, Siddha, perfect. You can draw your own conclusion from that. He's a Nitya Siddha, eternally perfect soul. So sitting in long times in a disembodied liberation gives you some idea of what that attainment is, and then enters immersion. You must say probably that if you're sitting in a disembodied state for 700 years, that's not yet immersion. There's a difference between merging and dissolving. So Vivekananda is holding a causal body so that he can return to earth. And so that's why he would sit in meditation, otherwise why bother? Just immerse. A hailstone falls in the ocean, zip, that's it. 320 million years go by and everyone's forgotten who he was. So the personality is erased entirely. There's just this one ocean of consciousness. So this has been a little trip through the Ajnana Bhumikas, the 7 lands of ignorance, into the 7 lands of acquiring knowledge, into the levels of highest knowledge, as a gift from Lord Vashishta in Vashishta's Yoga, and a chart that I put here to make it more simple. The live streaming audience will now look at these on screen while we take our 15-minute break, and you can also come up those here and look at these charts close up if you like. After the break, we will go and look at Ramakrishna's description of perfected beings, because the word perfect has come up so many times. This is an old chart that we should look at again, based on that word siddha, or perfection. We'll also look at another way of transcending ignorance through this new chart. So let's take our break here, please, and thank you for your attentions all around. Svagatam. Welcome back to our second half of our class, number 3, on the Advaita of the Avatars. Necessarily, we've been showing the main reason, one of 3 or 4 main reasons that Krishna cites in the Bhagavad Gita for the Avatar's descent. And that is to restore the Dharma, to help people use the Dharma to gain enlightenment. They're also to help the suffering and the lowly ones, as I said earlier in class, and these are some of the main reasons why an avatar would make the great yagya, make the great sacrifice of coming out from formless bliss and peace and contentment and freedom, and enter into the realm of name and form with us, so that we would have a grand exemplar for how to get free. Swami Vivekananda probably being the best example of that in our recent times. So we looked necessarily then at stages of gaining enlightenment, which also included, in a very unique look, stages of ignorance. Not treated very often in circles, that you get a teaching on ignorance in stages. It's pretty much just massed together as Maya or Avidya or Samsara, those words. But to see how a person grows out of ignorance and begins to put childish things behind them and mature, even up to the intellectual stages we were seeing in this recent chart, and then finds religion, as they say, and then finally gets spiritually awakened. The Kundalini becomes involved at that point. Sri Ramakrishna himself made a statement about Kundalini Shakti, that no spiritual growth or awakening will happen without it. So the Kundalini system has to be placed in a genre of pathways that's of the highest and most immediate import to us. That's why I've just finished a book called Reclaiming Kundalini Yoga, and have put it out in a very concentrated but easy to understand form, with some charts like these, some visuals to help the aspirant understand what Kundalini Shakti is, because you must get this energy awakened and traveling upwards, that means inwards, in order to have access to these higher levels of knowledge and wisdom, and even the end of wisdom in truth, as Krishna says in the Gita. So it would be, that's one side of the coin we're looking at in this teaching. The other side is the nature of an avatar. What's that being like? Not just what his teachings are like, but what is the actual soul like? And that's why I've put this up for you to see, this 5 ways to perfection, according to Sri Ramakrishna. He mentions all these in the Gita, and I mean in the Gospel of Ramakrishna. And I've just pulled them together with certain quotes from him, so that we can see them all on one page instead of 1,000 pages, which the Gospel is more than 1,000 pages long. So if we can see teachings like that gathered on one page, it gives us an example and a good definition of that word siddha, which can run the gamut of meanings. It can mean things associated with hemp smoking. It can be a person of a very low caliber of attainment. A siddha is considered, the siddhas and the munis are considered very low level of attainment spiritual beings. Siddha can also mean an occult power one goes after, like the Astabala siddhas, levitation and those kinds of things, which are considered by most avatars to be, well, to quote Ramakrishna, crow droppings by the side of the road, and not useful for your spiritual life. And siddha can also mean perfect, and that's the way we're going to use that word here. That Sanskrit word defined here is perfect soul. Like we talked about Vivekananda just before the break, he was a Nitya Siddha, Ramakrishna called him, an eternally perfect soul. So here is these 5 mentions of different kinds of siddha, or siddhas, that people, the spiritual realm, some of them we see walking around on the world from time to time. First of all, his quote here, "One can gain spiritual perfection through both affirmation and negation. Blend tears of yearning with discrimination and renunciation, and you will be able to see God." I really could have used this chart for the series we just finished with that quote in tow, meaning the devotion of non-separation, is he's talking the path of neti-neti is negation and the path of iti-iti is of affirmation. So he's saying one can gain spiritual perfection, not just advancement, perfection, by putting together the paths of affirmation and negation. This is what the Ramakrishna devotees have been doing ever since he brought that synthesis to earth. And what Swami Vivekananda exemplifies when he appears is this beautiful integration of yogas like that. So to explain it more, the Master said, blend tears of yearning with discrimination and renunciation, and you will be able to see God. This is the all-inclusive path of positive love and devotion commingled with transcendent knowledge. Probably the only thing you would add to that is meditation. After you have this commingling of the two wings of the bird, which my teacher was always talking about, bhakti and jnanam, then just sit and meditate on that over time. And this distilling of these three yogas will purify the fourth yoga, karma, action. So you're doing devotion, you're doing devout action, aren't you? You're doing pujas, you're doing chanting, you're doing things of an active nature in the spirit. Then on the other side you have wisdom, which is discriminating wisdom, and that's trimming away all the ignorance away from your knowledge base, purifying the intellect and so forth. Then you meditate on the result of those two, and your path of action becomes naturally purified. And everywhere you go, you see God in everything, even in the sinners, saint and sinner alike. You see nothing but Brahman there, in nature and in people. You see that one underlying reality. So that's a description of synthesizing the four yogas, and I'm adding to this particular quote by adding in meditation on that, and the natural outcome of pure action that comes from it. It's an all-inclusive path, he says. Now, these 5 ways, you can see the first one there that we talked about, that Ramakrishna called Vivekananda Nityasiddha. His quote is, that is Ramakrishna's quote, "A class apart, he nevertheless practices disciplines after realization. He is similar to the gourd or the pumpkin vine, first fruit, then flower." It's a very nice analogy Ramakrishna used. You watch the pumpkin plant and you see fruit comes first and the flower comes afterwards. So he's saying that first comes perfection, then he practices disciplines, and the flowers happen. So he's one of those rare cases, unlike almost all the rest of us, who enter into spiritual practice so that we perfect ourselves. He's already perfect, and then he enters into spiritual practice. See? So it's a very unique soul that can do that and does do that, and of course will do it as an example to others, like Ramakrishna taking teachers I was mentioning in the first half of the class. So that's a Nityasiddha, first fruit and then flower. Interesting analogy he makes. Now, right on down, there's also the being called the sadhana siddha. Remember I mentioned in the Uddhava Gita, Sri Krishna telling his disciple Uddhava that sometimes it is that certain souls will gain their illumination by their own effort. That's sadhana. Those are also rare souls. Most are waiting for grace, kripa siddha, or they're waiting for it to come out of nowhere, hatat siddha, or they're maybe in a dream or through initiation or something. These are how they're depending on getting their perfection. But the sadhana siddha is unique in that way. Let's see his quote. "Through austerity, japa, meditation, and study, this rare class of beings realize God through the practice of spiritual disciplines." So that's always held at a very high level of admiration by the seers. They like those beings who can get realization on their own steam. In a sense, it's like saying, why bother God for every little thing? You see? Mm-hmm. Oh, please, God, save me. Save yourself. Or you could say it this way. You could say, please, God, give me the will to do spiritual practice. I've heard excuse me, I've heard that said before by devotees. because I can't even drum up the ability to do practice, you see, but I want to do practice. You know, sound familiar to some of you? I really wish I was a great practitioner, but you know, I'm a legend in my own dreams, you know, but not in actuality. So if I were to somehow acquire that urge to do sadhana, that's a good prayer. But you don't want to depend too much on the avatar. Like sometimes we say, the avatar should really be a doorway. It should not be a doormat. So my teacher put that in a slightly more enlightening way, in a more refined way, by saying, in the West, the avatar is called a savior. But on the eastern horizon, an avatar is called an exemplar. Now that's a beautiful saying. That's an Advaita Vedanta Zen koan. Something to contemplate. In the West, we call him a savior when he comes, avatar. But on the eastern horizon, he's always been called an exemplar. You get the distinction, I hope. You're supposed to follow the avatar and be like thy Father is in heaven, perfect, as he said. But a savior means you have to depend on salvation. When the non-dual teachings are telling you that you're already free, that ignorance and evil and those kinds of things are not real. So this is the help you get by bringing in the Vedanta into these religious peripheries. Remember this, the chart, right? You got to religion first, and then you got spiritually awakened. That is, you got your intellect well wedded in the world, on the sandstone of the world, you see. And then you got religion. So in that religious context, you were thinking about salvation. So I got to get to heaven. But that all ended when you got spiritually awakened. You found out that there's something called liberation. And you found out that heaven wasn't the greatest thing, wasn't the ultimate goal. And the lives of Buddha and Krishna and Ramakrishna proved that to you when you looked at them. Probably the lifetime of Christ also proved that to you, because I and my Father are one proved that there was something higher than heaven. Unless you were to define heaven as non-duality, then I have no problem with it. But if you define heaven as the realm of your ancestors, I have a problem with it. That's where all problems are. Rebirth being the first one. So it depends on how you define the terms, of course. But back to this idea of religion, when you're spiritually awakened, you're thinking in terms of dharma, not morality. And when you become a practitioner, you're thinking in terms of sadhana instead of dharma. You take them up one at a time. Morality to dharma to sadhana to becoming an adept. When you're a spiritual adept, pretty much your ignorance is on the way out. You'll not see it again. So you've reached a divine status. Tantra calls that pasu, virya, and daiva. That's the triput you get in Tantra. That is, pasu means animalistic. Funny that it's on this chart too. Pasu means the animalistic soul who's still attached to nature and matter, and is very ignorant and very attached to outer things. Virya means heroic. So this is a soul Krishna describes as, he wants to help all other souls. He's found the energy and become heroic. We shall become heroes. You know where that comes from. We shall crush the stars to atoms. We will unhinge the universe. Don't you know who we are? We're the children of Sri Ramakrishna. And then later on it says that other phrase comes in and is used. So that kind of heroicness, we shall become heroes and have no more of ignorance, is a part of that poem he wrote. So that's the virya state. But from virya, heroic, you go to divine, daiva, or divya. And the divine status means a spiritual adept who is fully manned with all the methods and is able to not only has already put his own ignorance to the run, but can now help you put yours to the run too. Just watch it go away quick if you stay in the company of a Lex Hickson or a person who is well advanced in their spiritual life. If you have such a person like that in your life, then your ignorance can't really survive. You can almost laugh it away in the company of some beings. They're so naturally marvelous. Like the adage is, darkness cannot exist around the sun. Far, far away from the sun, maybe darkness is there, but if you get close to the sun, its days are numbered. You see, it's over. So that's what you feel like in the presence of a great soul like that. And much, much, much more so, a billion suns in the case of an avatar. So a sadhana siddha is qualifying himself for jivan mukta and for videha mukta. They're practicing sadhana with a intention of refining their awareness to the nth degree, and then proving all of those beautiful adages. I and my Father are one, tat tvamasi, aham brahmasmi, all those beautiful sayings in different traditions that have to do with non-duality. There's actually a beautiful song. I haven't sung any of the songs because of the teachings are so powerful in this series of classes, but there's a song that Tulsidas wrote where he mentions this exact thing. He says, Itani vinati raghunandan se dukha dandva hamara bitao ji. Itani vinati raghunandan se dukha dandva hamara bitao ji. 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 Itani vinati raghunandana se. This is my prayer to thee, O Raghunanda. So, Tulsidas, one of the most well-known of all Indian songwriters and poets, who even made the bridge into the West, some of his songs very well known here, sings this song. He says, O Lord, this is my prayer to thee. He's praying to one of the avatars, Raghunanda, which means Sri Ramchandra. It's called Raghunanda. And so he's praying to the avatar. He says, this is my prayer to thee, O Raghunanda. Kindly destroy my mind's tendency to perceive duality. What an odd prayer, you see. I mean, you're waiting for the prayer to come from this devotee, give me lands, give me wealth, give me spiritual enlightenment. But he says, just take away my mind's tendency to perceive duality. He's very clever, you see, in a good way. And he goes on and says, because that will remove all my sorrows and sufferings. Why? Because Atman alone abides. He's already come to certitude, right, of non-duality. He's already reached a high state of wisdom. Jnana Bhumika. Only Atman abides. Nothing else exists. So he already knows this, so he wants the Lord to fulfill his prayer by making him completely non-dual in all his perspective. In other words, to see God in everything. So these teachings, the poems, the songs, the teachers themselves, all integrated nicely, you see, in Siddha, in a kind of perfection that never breached imperfection. You see. It's not the kind of perfection that, I was once imperfect, now I can get perfect. It was an eternal perfection that always was. I just wandered away from it for a while, if you will. I dreamed myself into ignorance. Silly me, you see. Silly me. So songs like that come to mind when you talk about profound lyrics or profound teachings. Who would put a song like that, a teaching like that in lyrics? You see. Just Take away my mind's penchant to perceive duality. That's all I ask. That's my prayer to the Avatar, you see. Well, the sadhana siddha is probably not praying for that. He's just doing it. He says, I'm going to, if Lord won't answer my prayer, I'm going to take away my mind's penchant to see duality under my own steam. Thank you very much. You see, here I go. There was that beautiful story of a man heard that if he emptied the ocean with a feather, Divine Mother would give him enlightenment. So he said, that's the way for me. So he went to the ocean side with a feather and he started taking out doles of the ocean, and he sat there for 2 or 3 days doing that. Somebody came by and said, you know, this is going to take you forever. He said, but enlightenment, I've got enlightenment state. So he went on doing it because he was completely, convinced in his mind. So after 3 or 4 more days, Mother appeared to him and said, okay, you can give that up now. I'll give you enlightenment. She gave him enlightenment. Well, that's called Kripa Siddha. Let's look at it. Perfection through grace. Ramakrishna says, and remember these are direct quotes out of the Gospel of Ramakrishna, a spiritual manuscript that everyone should read. It's incomparable in this day and age as a testament, not only to the Avatar's path, but to the immense mass of wisdom, teachings, and devotional practices, and universality of religions that are contained within the Gospel of Ramakrishna, an amazing testament, spiritually speaking. So he says, like a room kept dark for countless years and illumined when a bright lamp is finally introduced, these good souls get liberation through God's own sweet grace. Wouldn't you like to be one of them? My teaching on it, and it's influenced by Sri Ramakrishna's other teachings, is that really these two cannot be separated. The person whose room is kept dark for 1,000 years is really doing sadhana all that time, and they earn their grace through sadhana. It may look like the two are different, but it's quite often the case that this is dependent on these other 4. So it's not like a person is sitting there doing nothing, completely pig ignorant, and then all of a sudden he gets grace. In case you're thinking that. Thief in the night kind of style, you see. No, that would make the karma law untrue. That would make all these hundreds and thousands of souls in samsara all of a sudden recipients for grace undeserved. And that happens. God will all of a sudden enlighten an evil person for a purpose in front of everyone to see. God his own purposes, as I say. Works in strange ways, his miracles to behold, and that kind of thing. Sure, that's all possible, but basically speaking, you'll find that this is pretty much dependent on all these. Let's look at the others. Hatat Siddha, Ramakrishna says about it, free all of a sudden, for no apparent reason, like a poor boy who, befriended by a rich man, is married to his daughter and given home and wealth. The master's sense of humor comes out there. I'm sure he said that with a laugh. The poor boy, he probably saw it happen. That a rich man gets a rich man as a friend, and all of a sudden he's in tight with his daughter, you see, and then gets married and gets all the wealth. And so that's Hatat Siddha. You get all this wealth of spiritual enlightenment all of a sudden for no reason. Hatat means suddenly, I think. So it's like sudden illumination for no apparent reason. But like I said, there are reasons hidden for that happening. This is a fun chart, isn't it? I'm having fun. I hope you are. Now, Swapna Siddha, if you recognize the word over here, Jagrat Swapna, Swapna, Swapna Jagrat, how the waking and dreaming state turn around on each other in this march out of ignorance. The same word appears here now, Swapna Siddha. Swapna means sleep, dreaming. So you get illumination in a dream. There are many people that come and ask me, Sufis, Buddhists, Muslims, what does your tradition say about the importance of dreams? So we used to be a little hard put to say anything. Well, the only thing you say is, from dreams awake, from bonds be free, That's the Upanishad's way of stating it. We don't believe in dreams. We believe in waking from the dream. This is all a dream. Dream number 1 is here, and dream number 2 is when you dream tonight. you want free of all dreams, so just wake up. But it's sort of, cast by the wayside dream used as an indicator, a pointer. There are some dreams, in other words, that are very profound, that can point you in the right direction or get you off the wrong path and back on the right path. And then there are some dreams that can do exactly the opposite. So dreams are a mixed bag, no doubt. But the dreams that come from that level, just coming out of deep sleep, tend to be very visionary. You'll see, divine beings with big long beards and things like that, and robes walking around with staffs. You'll have visions of Muhammad or Moses or whoever you worship, will come to you. And if you remember those when you wake up, sometimes it is hard to remember them because you dream after that. And it takes away the original profound dream and replaces it with all these other layers of dreams, so you don't remember that. So that's why they have you meditate as soon as you get up in the morning. They don't even want you to wash your hands and face. If you can just sit up, don't do it in bed because they don't want you to meditate in bed. Get off your bed, get over to your asana, which is a meditation seat, and go right into meditation and think about what you just experienced in your inner consciousness. And that's the best chance you have of remembering that profound dream that is buried under all those other dreams. Because usually you'll leave your bed and you'll walk around and say, I remember I had a dream. You'll tell a friend you had a dream. And then that'll remember, oh, that was connected to another dream. So it's kind of coming back to you after the fact. But the original dream you had that started out the sequence of cause and effect of dreams has been buried behind all those connections. And if you don't get up when it's fresh and get on the trail, you're tracking that dream back inside of yourself, and then you won't uncover that powerful dream again. Sometimes there's a very powerful dream that shines through all your other dreams, no matter what. You'll wake up stunned by it. Now that's marvelous. I cannot deny that happened to me. And you don't go off and tell other people about it because they're going to say, oh, it was just a dream, and then all of a sudden you start thinking, oh, it wasn't important after all, was it, you see? So you keep it to yourself and quiet, or maybe share it with your teacher. But there are some dreams that happen to you in life that are very profound. So a little bit about that Swapna Siddha. Let's see what he says about it. Perfect in a dream. There is another class of devotees who, very fortunate and deserving, in a profound state of dream, get the vision of God and are set free. There are several cases in Holy Mother's life, Sri Sharada Devi. And so she was in the train station in Calcutta in one of these stories that we've heard her say, that's been written down. And a man came up to her and said, you're my Janaki. Janaki means Sita, Ram's beloved. I saw you in a dream. So this obviously was a devotee of Ram and Sita. He says, you're my Janaki. I saw you in a dream. You gave me a mantra in a dream. So Holy Mother said, it was a crowded, noisy train station. So she took him aside in a quiet corner, evidently, and said, now tell me what you dreamed and tell me the mantra I gave you. And so he told her the dream and told her the mantra, and she corrected it. She said, well, you didn't come out of the dream with the exact pronunciation, but you did fairly well. But here, let me tell you what the mantra really should be. And she corrected that mantra and sent him on his way. So an instance of a person who met their guru once in their lifetime, only once, and got free. In this case of a great soul. I mean, that combines Hatat Siddha and Swapna Siddha, doesn't it? You get free suddenly for no apparent reason. Or maybe because of a dream you had and you didn't really remember that dream until you saw Holy Mother at a train station. Hey, you were in my dream, you see. And you gave me a mantra. It was the most impressive dream of my life, and all of a sudden everything comes together, you see. So it's very beautiful instances in the life of the devotees. He says here, there is another class of devotee. So this happens not on the level of, necessarily on the level of people who are already spiritually adept or masters and so forth. These are devotees that are working on their spiritual life and sharpening their arrow. And God comes in the form of an enlightened soul, in the form of a dream, and gives them enlightenment. So here's something in the Vedantic tradition we can tell you about the importance of dreams, other than hurry up and awaken from them, as the Upanishads say in a non-dual sense. Use them to get awake. You're not the dream, you're the dreamer. That's a line out of a song of Ram Prasad Sen, the poet saint of Bengal. And also, O dreamer awake, you must, another line out of a song. So dreaming, the dream of finitude is how Lex Hixon described that. You're in a dream of finitude, but you don't know the reality of infinity. All dreams are finite because they're attended with the covering power of form, right? So blast through that form, see the formless essence that is yourself. That's the non-dual way of speaking. Come to our retreat in May on the Columbia River Gorge, where the Wind River meets the Columbia River, in a beautiful forest location where the subject is going to be Advaita Vedanta and Zen Buddhism. I'm going to teach those two non-dual sides in one 3-day retreat. So you should be there for that if you can. Well, I was talking about Sri Ramakrishna's sense of humor. Here's another one. How about asiddha? Not perfected even by accident. A very sorry class of beings. How does he say it? Like trying to drive a nail into a stone wall. There are many beings whose spiritual consciousness is not the least awakened, even though they hear about God 1,000 times. Alas. So, Krishna's way of teaching that is in the Bhagavad Gita, the chapter called The Division Between the Divine and the Demoniacal. He talks about the demoniacal not as if they don't have a soul or they don't have an Atman, that their soul is buried so deep under actions of negativity, sins, transgressions, evils that they've committed, that it will take an avatar's grace to come along and awaken them, if they should be so fortunate. So you have really a gamut of the meaning of siddha here, don't you? Perfection. You have that which comes by grace, you have that which comes by effort, you have that which comes in a dream, you have that which comes unexpectedly for reasons you don't know, and you have that which never comes. Beware of that last one, now that you've heard about it. Asiddha, non-perfection. Now these two quotes to finish. One can gain spiritual perfection through both affirmation and negation. I'm repeating this. Blend tears of yearning with discrimination and renunciation, and you will be able to see God. This is the all-inclusive path of positive love and devotion, commingled with transcendent knowledge. In other words, in the practice of this comprehensive yoga, one of these will happen to you. Hopefully not this one, of course. X that one out. The final quote at the bottom of the page says, "Why shouldn't a man be able to realize the formless Brahman? He need only renounce the sense objects. Then he too will know this much about Brahman, that it exists." There's another good Advaita Vedanta Zen koan. You need to know that much about God, that it exists. Or put another way, it is existence. Because we exist, that means God is. And I am that. I and my Father are one. See? So that teaching is always headed towards a kind of perfection that's called in our tradition Advaita, non-duality. And it penetrates through what we call the curtain of nescience, or the cloud of unknowing, that binds people into Maya and into nature as being the only recourse. Speaking about songs in the tradition, so those ignorant souls, the asiddhas, if you want to call them that, they give themselves to the illusion of finitude. They think themselves born from nature, and then so forth. They concentrate on nature, and then they return to nature. So they give themselves to the illusion of death. By their own will, they do that. By their own design, They give themselves to death. And then an avatar comes along every once in a while and says, but what about eternal life? I can give you eternal life. Through one of these methods, you see, you can get eternal life. You don't have to give yourself to the illusion of finitude or the illusion of death anymore. So that's a fortunate soul who receives the grace of an avatar. So a lot to be said about these great beings. I'm glad we're getting around to a series of classes about it. I think in the first class I mentioned the avatar, the divine incarnation, isn't always held in that high esteem by some souls, because they're always found working with the lowly and the fallen beings. So they think, oh, those beings must not be that high because they're descending down into the depths of other levels of consciousness and helping beings. But that's the one Vivekananda says that the difference between compassion and love is that love rolls up its sleeves and gets busy. You see. If you see that you're no different than me and you're suffering, then I must roll up my sleeves and help you because you and I are the same being. That's love. Compassion can too often stand back and go, oh, that's really too bad. I'm sorry for you. Can I help you in any way? What do you know? You're suffering. How can you tell? Do you know what kind of help you need? So it has to be much more direct than that. So true love will see the removal of the distinction between God and nature, between mankind and spirit, between creature and creator. Remove the distinction between them and get busy and raise to the right stature. To that stature which we are. Now, in the remaining time, I was going to show you this new chart, which is quite a study in itself. This is the most recent chart. I fashioned it just last week and was able to make a beautiful copy of it here on the islands that's more clear. And it has to do with that, what the avatar teaches in terms of progress towards freedom. Now, freedom is the key word in Vedanta and Buddhism. Freedom from all trammels. Freedom from name and form, freedom from nature, freedom from bondage, freedom from dependence, freedom from ignorance, however you put it, that is the key word. It's called moksha. And the definition of moksha in my tradition is that which is always at hand. It is the eternal state of your being. It cannot be gained through sadhana. It's already yours. What you're doing when you practice sadhana is to remove the impurities of the mind so you can see that it's yours. So it's not something that's brought into being through time, freedom. It's not something that you get by purifying your senses or something. Because that would mean that you're creating freedom. But it's already, a given. Freedom is your true nature. It's the nature of the soul. So there's nothing you can think of that falls under the category of transformation, change, purification, evolution, that will define moksha. Cannot be defined that way. It's a freedom already at hand, always at hand. It never had an inception, it will never have an end. And it's the only thing that puts an end to Maya. Nothing else will. They say Maya is eternal. The only time it ends is when the soul gets nirvikalpa samadhi. Otherwise, Maya will persist in some form, even Mahamaya. But moksha will get rid of it. So those precious words from my tradition about moksha, or you can also call it mukti. They use that word mukti too. So progress towards true freedom, what does it look like? The first quote here by Vivekananda says, liberation, freedom, mukti is all my religion. And everything that tries to curb it I will avoid by flight or fight. Freedom is the only condition of growth. Take that off and the result is degeneration. So you can see how precious he considers the word freedom to be, which is probably why he passed away on July 4th, by the way. To give us a new slant and a new meaning on that kind of freedom that we thought of as political and so forth. generated by governments or something, which is quite disappointing when you see one government enslaves the people in another way when the past government is put out of the picture. So freedom never comes, does it, really? You only enjoy a little period of peace, but war is always coming back and taking the foreground. So the real peace and the real freedom, then, they say, is the peace that passes all understanding and the freedom you get by getting free of bondage for all times. So that's why it says here, that's the only condition for growth. If you're trying to get freedom through any other mechanism, it's going to fail. That's what it means. True growth is based on freedom. And it's based on the existence of freedom, not creating freedom for yourself. It's very important to think about that when you do your sadhana. That's probably why Hatha Siddha happens. I think I'll think a little differently today about my meditation. Boom, all of a sudden, you got Hatha Siddha. All you needed was just a little shift of your mind to this new perspective, and that's it. You see, that's all I needed. I got sudden enlightenment. And you're running around the neighborhood telling people, "Free, I'm free." And they're calling the little white men in the white coats, you see. So these things all very much interconnected, but that change in thinking will be very beneficial to you. Now, for this chart, you have to start at the bottom, at the black dot. It's called tamas. That is, just rude ignorance. It's just dense. They call it tundra. You can see the word tundra, darkness. Sleep, ignorance. They call it here ignorance about what? Vital energy, meaning, selflessness, higher intelligence, and the soul. If you don't have those, that's ignorance. I mean, if you're ignorant of your prana, that's the first peg in the coffin of ignorance. You have to know about your energy. Tamas does not have energy. Tamas has slothfulness, laziness, complacency, prevarication, heedlessness, lethargy. How many other English words? We have a lot of words for that. Why don't we have words like moksha and mukti in the English language? We have a lot of words for lethargy and slothfulness. So if you're ignorant of your vital energy, then you're in tamas. And if you're ignorant of the meaning of things, you have no idea what the tree means or your relationship means or food means, you have no understanding whatsoever. So this is also called Bhranti. The arrow goes there. Bhranti, delusion. Bhranti. And the quote there for Vivekananda, let each one work out his or her own freedom. You must raise yourself out of darkness. And to do that, you would go to Tamo Rajas. Now it's more gray, not black. It's bandha, bondage. It relates to karmana, kamana, pleasure seeking. That's where you find the pleasure seeking problem. And ignorance related to Bhranti and delusion, as we said. It's bondage to what? Sense objects, pleasure, excitement, family, pastimes, feelings, brooding on all of the above. That's Tamo Rajas. It's also not a very peaceful condition to have your mind in. And its main linchpin, as they say, is kamana, that is pleasure seeking. All of those things, sense objects, pleasure, excitement, family, pastimes, are all around pleasure. And somebody even said that at the break to me. Seeing the beauty in everything is a kind of pleasure. So you end up at 80 or 90 years old saying, isn't that a beautiful tree? But you've just spent 90 years looking at trees. And you're still attached to the beauty of a tree. And you never knew that the tree was empty. You didn't know that scientifically, and you didn't know that spiritually until quantum physics had to come along and tell you, guess what? You're not looking at a tree. You're looking at the appearance tree. It's vibrating particles changing at a billionth of a second. How's that for a world? Sound like shifting sands to you? That's how Christ described it. So what about that awakening? I told people this morning at satsang, a lot of my best realizations came from harsh teachings that woke me up. Reading things and saying, that applies to me. Slap in the face teaching. That was the best thing to read and hear, and apply it to yourself. See? Well, that's how you get up and out of ignorance. Who else is going to do it for you? Somebody, your best friend, going to come up and tell you that you're selfish, or your family going to tell you that? Usually not. Now, you go from that dot. I mean, I'd like to put a smiley face on each one of those dots for you, but it's not the nature of these teachings. You go from tamo rajas to rajas itself, which should really be red, but it's a black and white chart, so you see it's a lighter shade of gray, a lighter shade of pale. And it's mrisa, pretense and vanity. Its linchpin is kapata, deception. It's pretense and vanity around what? False attainment, assumed status, feigned authority, and the sense of superiority over others. That's pretty much the description of pride, or mrisa, they call it in Sanskrit. Its linchpin is deception. I'll get you the other teachings on the way. I just want to show you the main underlying foundations. Now remember, this is much like this chart, and it's much like this chart too. We're showing a kind of progress towards freedom, but we're doing it in terms of the dynamics of human emotion and human intelligence, rather than stations of philosophy, as this other chart was like, or just a simple rendering of how a soul makes gradated progress. This is put more in terms of actual human souls, personalities, as they march towards a higher freedom. The quote there under Rajas, those social skills, those social rules that stand in the way of freedom are injurious and should be done away with. So you can see there at the level of family and pretense and so forth, or false attainment. I am a professor, I am a scientist, it's my knowledge. This is mine. I am superior, my religion is better than others, and so forth and so on. You have that whole cross-section of impediment to the soul's moving forward. Spiritual ego would be there too. That is, assumed status. I'm better than others, my religion is better than others. Then you go to Rajasattva. You're beginning to blend the red with the white, and it's coming out rather yellow. See, so here's a little bit higher station. It's called Chaitanya, or spiritual awakening. Its linchpin is sadhana. It's ushering in what? Glimmerings of insight, intuition, aspiration, willingness to practice, and positivity. You can see the whole atmosphere change all of a sudden. Willingness means basically self-surrender, isn't it? I mean, you're surrendering up your impediments that you had held pretentiously at the last station of life. You're opening up. You're getting humble. You're considering your own wisdom nothing compared to the wisdom of God, wisdom of Divine Mother. And you're willing to learn. Then you get sattva at the top. That's mumukshutvam. It's not quite mukti or moksha yet, which that word mumukshutvam infers, but it's the desire to be free. You can see how hard the desire to be free is to earn. Freedom, that's really hard to earn, but just the desire to be free, they call that very hard to earn. So when the soul gets the sincere desire to be free, you'll see a change in them. And all of a sudden, it's like back here, the path of indifference, right? All of a sudden they're indifferent to excitement, family, status, authority, pleasure-seeking, feelings, pastimes, so forth, they become indifferent to it. They want true freedom. This is an authentic desire for freedom, not a on again, off again desire for freedom that you see quite often in people. Its linchpin is prasana, clarity of mind. You have to be clear in order to get that true desire for liberation. Doesn't it sound a lot like certitude of non-duality back here? You see? You know that that exists and you want it, so you're standing up for it in this lifetime. You're going to get it in this lifetime. There's no other thing that you prefer other than that. You're not going to take any second best, or like Swami Shardananda, I'll wait to see God in everything. If I can't have it now, I'll wait for it. It's the desire to be free involving what? Recognition of oneness of all things, the discrimination between the real and the unreal, detachment from the unreal, and willingness to practice. Sadhana that comes into bear there. Because back there in the pretentious level, you didn't need to practice. You were already great in your own mind. You were a legend in your own mind. You see. Nobody can tell me anything. I'm already a spiritual giant. You see. I know better than others. My religion is better than others. And so to rid yourself of that level of thinking and to arrive at the willingness to do practice and to open up is a major step in spiritual life. It has to do with clarity of mind. Let's go, and the quote there is, "There must be freedom of the individual to express his nature." These are all little quick quotes of Vivekananda that I put in there. May you speedily attain to freedom and then help others attain it. And advancement towards liberation is freedom. It's the worthiest gain of mankind. Those are quotes that I put in from Swami Vivekananda to show you how important that word freedom was to him. Now, please go back down to the lowest part of the chart on the right-hand side here. I want to show you how, in a way of the characterization, as I put down here, of this march towards higher freedom. It started out with Bhranti delusion, didn't it? But it was based on spriha, desire. These are this is the linchpins, but these are the sets of supporting qualities that support the linchpins, like in any good machine. So there'll be a supporter, and then there'll be the actual linchpin itself in these moving machines. So desire is there, spriha it's called in Sanskrit. Bhranti, delusion, is there, and it's attended by lokayatika, materialism. So you can see pretty much in that level of dark tamas, this is a good definition, a threefold definition of what the soul is laboring under. If he steps up, then he begins to get out of tamas and gets a little rajas into it, a little activity, still quite frenetic. Then the threesome there is pleasure seeking, and it's based on distraction, vikshepa, and also attended with sense enjoyment, apadika, alpadika. So you can see that, for instance, sense objects, pleasure, excitement, family, pastimes, feelings, and brooding are distractions. Vikshepa, they're distractions. You might have lived a great family life and had lots of fun. And later on you look back and say, boy, that was really a 20-year period where I didn't go anywhere. Guess what? It was like I ate a sweetmeat, it went down the throat, and I can't even remember what it tasted like anymore. All that laughter, all those good times, all that drinking, all that family stuff, all those games, everything I experienced in my family for 20 years. What did it amount to? In fact, it could have amounted to some very deep indentions in my consciousness called samskaras that are going to bring me back to family again next lifetime, because I want more of the same. The camel eats thorny bushes, even though his gums bleed, but he still goes on eating thorny bushes. And he comes back as a camel in his next lifetime to eat more thorny bushes, is how Ramakrishna put it. So this distracted mind is a major hurdle in getting out of all forms of tamas. We think, oh, distraction and pastime, that sounds more like rajas, but really it's raja-tamas. And it's a hard hole to pull yourself out of. It doesn't look like a hole. I mean, think of it as multi-dimensional instead of one-dimensional. You'll see it's like you're sucked down this hole of that kind of life. Buddha wanted out of that, no doubt, and found a way out. And other avatars did too. The next level then, let's look at that threesome. That is mrisa, that kind of vanity, pretentiousness that's there in the soul. Quite that arrogance that's there in the Western soul that thinks since it's rich and opulent, that it's a better society than everywhere else, and that its fundamentalist religion is better than all others. And because it's, as my teacher said, your belief in God here in the West is based on the saying, pray to God, but keep the gunpowder dry. He saw right through us. Pray to God, but keep the gunpowder dry. Why do you need gunpowder if you're putting your faith in God? Why don't you go and help other nations, not dominate them? So this power of domination comes from pretentiousness, thinking yourself to be superior. Well, I mean, you can look at that teaching right away and just say, oh, Babaji, I don't quite get it, or I don't agree with it. But when you think about it and apply it on everything that's going on out there, on the world level, on the political level, on the business level, on the competitive level, you cannot deny that that's an occult power called domination over others. And we just looked at the occult powers here. We just looked at them, how a person works up through them and must be free of them. So, based on deception, isn't it? Kapata, you're deceived. You're deceiving yourself into thinking you're greater than others and so forth. What are the underlying linchpins to that main pin? It's all Vedana Moha, emotionalism. See, people get very emotional in their families. They get very emotional in society. They get very emotional in the military. They get very emotional here and there, and it ends up in tamo rajasic action that hurts others. Violence. Unthought violence. Like Dalai Lama writing to President Bush when 9/11 happened. Don't react. A letter came to the White House from Dalai Lama. He can speak from experience. He's not just some spiritual person out there. He's had his country ruined by war. A letter comes. Oh, don't go to war and eye for eye, tooth for tooth kind of thing, because you'll hurt innocence. You'll create more karma. There's enough karma now, let's just work that out first, you see. Stay yourself a little bit. No, wouldn't listen to it. No. Is it because he was a bad person? Well, it's probably because war makes money. It's not like these people are fools. They're just grant unto Caesar what are Caesar people. They're probably outthinking you by a long ways, in their cleverness. And you're still thinking back there in the moral level, oh, it's not right to do that, it's not right to do that. It's naive. What's not right has been happening to the world ever since it was incepted. And it will not stop happening to the world because the world is unreal. So you haven't renounced it. That's why people give it up, is because they're waiting for some change that's never going to happen because the whole thing is change. You can't build your house on that kind of sand. You have to build it on bedrock. So you can look at it and slice it any way you want, on any level of existence, from worldly to intellectual to religious. But when you get beyond religion, you start awakening. And you start being less naive. You get clarity of mind, you see. That's the next step, isn't it? It involves clarity of mind. Now you see why everyone's doing everything. The evil, the good, and the transcendent. See, the spiritual beings. You see why they're doing everything. You see the whys and wherefores. You know, there's that teaching on the 5 W's that we give. Why, where, what, when, and who. Why is cause and effect. Where is space. When is time. What is objects, name and form. But who is the greatest question of all, because you're asking, who am I? You're finding out that I'm really a sentient soul. I'm not matter. So you can say those 4 W questions, are they worthless? Not if you take them and put them in a spiritual setting. Then you're asking, where was the soul incepted? What is the soul? When did it come about? See? Now the 4 W's all of a sudden take on a huge teaching, don't they? Thank you to my wife for informing me about that teaching. The 5 W's are, in one context, the 4 of them are very potentially demeaning and circular. They call it circular thinking. They don't lead you out. But when you put them in the spiritual context, they all become very powerful allies for your trip out of freedom. Don't forget that kapata is not only accompanied by emotionalism, as I was talking about just now. People get very emotional and do unthought things, unseemly things, in the military, in business, in the world, in families. It's happening all the time. Holy Mother had to put up with it in her family, of all things. It's also accompanied by udasina, indifference. Indifference to wisdom, indifference to teachings, indifference to your family, that is, their feelings, their needs, indifference to the path of liberation that beings are following one way or another. So that's a kind of negative indifference that is there in the sense, in the insensitive being, let's put it that way. And the next level, that trio had to do with spiritual awakening, is based on self-effort, sadhana. Now it's attended by alochana. Alochana means deep thinking. And it's also attended on the other side by upalabdhi, perception. So you can see how spiritual awakening has those 3. You get sadhana and self-effort, and you start thinking deeply about things, and you perceive. From deep thinking comes perception. Upalabdhi. It's a very beautiful teaching, and when it happens to you, you find yourself smack dab in the middle of the Dharma, the realm of the Dharma. That's known for deep thinking and perception. The Buddhists will tell you that, so will the Vedantists. Oh, guess what? You're in the middle of the higher rungs of Dharma right now, when you're thinking about things and you're getting direct perception, see, of how things work. You're the Sherlock Holmes of the spiritual world. See? Oh, I see. Oh, I see. See? And it's happening just like that, one after the other, you see. Just like atoms of knowledge are getting released and imploded in your mind. And you're on the trail. The game's afoot, and the game is about to end too. Let's see what that's like. You get to sattva and you have a desire to be free from all games, even the game of knowledge and ignorance. And that's attended by this threesome. Adhigama, that is basically the main foundation is, as we said, prasana, clarity of mind. You get clarity of mind. That's akin to khyati and dharma mega, rain cloud of virtues. In Buddhism and in yoga, both Buddha and Patanjali made that connection of dharma mega samadhi, the attainment of virtues that come forth like a natural rain cloud when you reach a certain level of perception, if you want to put it that way. So basically, that's true attainment, adhigama. And adhigama also refers to qualification. You're really qualifying yourself for Brahman. You're qualifying yourself for a life lived in Brahman. It's also attended on this other side by niskampana, stability. Sthiti samadhi, yes, but sthiti pragnasya, as we were talking about this morning in satsang, stability. You are rock solid. You're like Shiva. See, you're solid in your realization. You can sit solidly. You can think solidly. You can not think solidly if you want to. And you can remove the solidity from objects. Everything is stable. So you've attained that very cherished level of attainment by the seers. They call stability, or if you want to call it this way, non-change, non-transformation. You've escaped the appearance of changefulness all the time. They call it immutability. It's a nice English word. Mutability is change, immutability is non-change. So you've attained that. Now, the only thing we haven't addressed in this chart in the remaining 5 minutes of our class here is how it all culminates in moksha, perpetual freedom. That's the word I started off when we entered into this chart about 25 minutes ago. It's perpetual freedom. It's a good word in English again, perpetual, because it infers that, it never had a beginning or end, it's just always there. Already at hand, as I said, is how I defined it. Moksha, already at hand, perpetual freedom. And see how it's associated with ananda, bliss. That's why they give bliss one of the highest reckonings. That's why the last name of thousands of beings on earth today is Ananda. This Ananda, that Ananda, and so forth. So, they haven't taken that name for no good purpose. And you can see the other little hidden teaching up there. It's based in samasti chitta, universal mind. You see here? You've become a spiritual master, and you'll soon be a past master. You've got the universal idea, the open, free mind, which I was saying you will find written in spades in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna if you read it. That beautiful testament to spirituality, all about this universal minded avatar. And that's a good place to end. We end the chart there. I think we've done all the quotes, and we've looked at the characters' additions, and we've seen how a person works out of the three gunas, which is why I really didn't spend a lot of time there, did I? See, I think it was somewhere up here. It goes beyond the three gunas. There. At the Asam Shakti level, transcends the three gunas. So that would be a good flash forward to this chart, and it's dots, black, brown, red, yellow, and white, if you were doing it in the color coding. From deep, dark tamas to tamas blended a little bit with restlessness, to restlessness itself, to the combination of restlessness turning towards higher things, and then to sattva itself. And Shankara avers that there's even something beyond sattva called pure sattva, which has to do with study of the scriptures, meditation, and those spiritual practices that were a part of your sadhana. That's a pure sattvic state that's beyond this kind of sattva. So we've looked at the avatar's path to freedom out of ignorance and all the levels of the phases of the soul and relativity in 3 charts within the last 6 hours. That is 3 hours this week and 3 hours last week. And we'll conclude next week with some teachings and songs about the avatar and its nature, and the Advaita of the avatar. Basically, we'll zone in more on the non-dual position that the avatar holds that makes all of this possible for them, and that has rolled it out like a carpet for us. 24 cosmic principle carpet. Cosmology connected to philosophy, connected to spirituality. So that's all the doing of this one supreme soul, called by Krishna, the name Krishna by the Vaishnavas, Shiva by the Saivites, Kali or Durga by the Shaktas, and Brahman by the Advaitists. That one supreme being. whose essence lies in all things, in all beings. So let's end here with a chant then and move towards next Sunday's class and next Sunday morning satsang. Om Sato Ma Satgamoya Tamaso Ma Joytir Gamoya Brichorma Amritam Gamaya Abira Bira Mayenti Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.